Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're here at Cole Harbour Heritage Farm Museum in the blacksmith shop actually. And we're riding out the remnants of Hurricane Ida this afternoon, and I'm happy to have Frank Smith here with us today, who's the author of this book about blacksmithing in Nova Scotia. It's called What Once Was Lost. And it's a wonderful book that examines the tradition of blacksmithing in this province, as well as talking about the new art form that seems to be emerging within the last 10 years or so. So Frank, why did you decide to do a book about blacksmithing in Nova Scotia?
Well, thanks for asking, Scott. It's lovely to be here. This is one of the most interesting places in the Halifax area for blacksmithing, both for traditional and for modern practice. So I decided to do this book out of a sense of frustration, really. I'm an amateur blacksmith, and I've been involved in the blacksmithing community in Nova Scotia for 20 odd years. One of the things that I found has always been lacking is this sense of history. I couldn't find anything out about what came before, about the history of blacksmithing in Nova Scotia. I knew that it started very early. I mean, the first blacksmithing shop in North America was here in what eventually became Nova Scotia. 1605, Sieur de Mons establishes the habitation at Port Royal, and that settlement had a blacksmith and a blacksmith shop. But what did they do? Where did they get their material? Did they only supply stuff for trade with the local indigenous population, or did they fix weapons, or did they make the hardware for the habitation? Couldn't find any information about this, and that lack of information follows all the way up really to the modern day. So I started looking into this, and sometime after I started to put some ideas together, I ran into Scott at a dinner party. Didn't know he was there, and somebody said, "So what do you do for fun?" And we were going around the room. People were describing their lifestyle activities, and I said I was an amateur blacksmith, but couldn't find much information about the history or whatever. Started to talk about sorts of things that I would have liked to have read myself. And Scott, sitting over in the corner, I didn't know he was a publisher at the time, approached me afterwards and said, "You know, I think there might be a book in this. Why don't we think about putting together an outline?" Met Scott, put together an outline. The outline was 2 or 3 pages, and at our first meeting, Scott said to me, "Well, Frank," he said, "your idea of this book is this big." And he gave me the best piece of advice I think I had while I was writing the book. He said, "This book is this big. Just focus on that." So I was frustrated because I couldn't find out any information about the history of smithing, and also I was curious to know who was doing what with the modern incarnations of the traditional blacksmithing skills that people used for centuries to make basic household items, industrial components, plowshares, this sort of thing. There weren't any blacksmiths doing this kind of trade that I knew of. But there were people who were using the techniques, traditional blacksmithing techniques, to make art. And there was a development in North America in general, and later on in Nova Scotia, from the 1970s to the present, where along with a general upswing in interest in crafts of all sorts, people began to use traditional blacksmithing skills to make different kinds of art, to express themselves, abstract art, and so on. And there were, I knew a number of people doing this in Nova Scotia, but I didn't really know anything about them or what they were doing. So that's 2 reasons why I wanted to write the book. I was frustrated, and I was wondering what was going on now with these traditional techniques. The third thing that hit me after I began the process of putting the book together was, where are we going with this? What's going to happen to traditional blacksmithing techniques eventually? Are they just going to get lost? Or are people going to take them in the future, as they're doing now, for their own purposes, to generate art, to do other things with those techniques, and to carry the use of those techniques into the future. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's a pretty good synopsis, Frank. So let's take a look at Frank's book here. It's called What Once Was Lost, and it was published in November of 2020, I believe. And there's a very, a wonderful history of the tradition of blacksmithing in the first section, and then a number of profiles of functioning blacksmiths / artists in the rear section. Here's some of Brad Hall's work, who's in Annapolis Royal, right?
Annapolis Royal, yes.
There's some of Brad Hall's work. Here is the famous John Little in action and some of his work. Probably the leading practitioner of metal arts in Nova Scotia, arguably, and he's featured, as well as here's Barb Schmeisser, who is a very good practicing artist blacksmith here in Dartmouth, right? Yeah, here in Dartmouth. So that's a glimpse at Frank's book, and we're so happy to be here today in Kevin Thomas's blacksmithing workshop, one of the last real traditional blacksmiths operating in Nova Scotia today. So I think we'll ask Frank Smith to have a few words with Kevin.
So I'm speaking with Kevin Thomas today. Kevin, it's a lovely shop to be in, especially in pouring rain outside, and the forge on. So Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the forge here and what you've been doing, and how that whole thing fits into the Heritage Farm Museum?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier, we're at the Cole Harbour Heritage Farm Museum here in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. This has been a working farm since 1780, and over the years there's been various blacksmith, shops and the equipment that has been on this farm. Mostly a portable forge that was operating on this farm over the years. When the society took over in 1970 and formed the Cole Harbour Rural Heritage Society, they acquired a forge from John Giles, who had a forge working on a neighboring farm down the road. And they set it up here just to show what blacksmithing was like in Cole Harbour during that time frame. I've been involved with the society and the farm here for about 20 years. I took welding as a trade in high school, after high school, not knowing what to do or what I wanted to do. I decided to take welding, and my father told me it was in my blood, and he explained to me that he worked in the blacksmith shop with his dad. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather were all blacksmiths in Pugwash, so as he said, it's in the blood. So it's been great to work here as the blacksmith at the Heritage Farm. We make various things here. A lot of things are repurposed from former farm machinery and old metals that are brought in, or things that are dismantled, and we repurpose them and sell them in our gift shop here.
So how did you actually get started with practical demonstrations and so on here? My understanding was that when the blacksmith shop came, it was kind of a static display, is that right?
For a lot of years it was.
Yeah.
They would have people with some interest, or persons with some interest, that would come in and do displays once in a while, just for the public, but for the most part it was a static display, as a lot of museums are, from time to time. So when I came back after I retired from the fire service here in Halifax Regional, still having that interest in wood, working with metal and whatnot. So heard a lot of things from people saying that we'd love to, to do workshops, and can we do workshops? Do you know where we can go to do workshops? And that they are available throughout Nova Scotia in different places, but we thought, well, we could try something like here. So I put together a program that talks about the history of blacksmithing, tool usage, hammer usage, and then they get to spend the day in the shop here and go home with a project at the end of the day.
Right. So this is a great opportunity for members of the public to find out just what blacksmithing was all about, both traditionally and what you can do now. And that's a fairly rare thing in this province as time goes on. And kind of relates to the title of my book, which is What Once Was Lost. And now those skills and their traditions and their uses are now coming back and being, as you say, repurposed not just the materials, but the people learning skills to do things with those materials to produce really important works. One of the interesting things, Kevin, about this shop here is that the fuel in this shop, used in the forge, is charcoal. Now, charcoal was the earliest blacksmithing fuel. Charcoal was made from wood, and was used long before coal, which is kind of supplanted charcoal in the last couple of centuries for industrial and general blacksmithing use. But this forge uses charcoal. So what are some of the advantages of charcoal?
Well, as you can imagine, it's much more plentiful. You know, you go to your local hardware store or a supermarket store and you can buy charcoal by the bag. We use the lump hardwood charcoal here. One of the bigger reasons why we use it here, where we're kind of nestled in a residential community, at one time we did use the traditional coal, but you know, if someone has white sheets out on a clothesline on a nice sunny day and we're using coal, there's lots of dust and dirt flying around that kind of upsets the neighbors. But so basically what we do here, we use the lump charcoal, and it's really nothing more than a wood fire or a wood stove fire going, so it's much more favorable to the community.
Fits right into the tradition.
It does, yes.
So where are we going with blacksmithing, do you think, Kevin?
It's hard to say. I mean, with the bigger manufacturing companies, it's certainly is not going to return as it did one day. Years gone by when the European settlers came over, as you mentioned earlier. Obviously, they had to bring a blacksmith and a blacksmith shop with them because they had no way of getting those tools and equipment otherwise. So they needed to manufacture them themselves. Where now, with Amazon and all the online services, you can get just about anything all over the world, brought to you within a few days' notice. But certainly, it's coming back as a hobby or as a sport of such, I guess. People are enjoying it to kind of relive the past, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and making things that and sense of accomplishment of doing it themselves.
And there's a market for that sort of
There
thing
is,
too,
yeah.
right? The things that you make here, garden ornaments and hinges, and door
Yeah.
hardware and other domestic hardware and so that sells.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, people like to see the hammer marks and know it's made local, and yes, you can go to a store and buy it much cheaper. That's manufactured in a plant somewhere, a manufacturing setting. But they like to see it locally made, and
Yeah.
they like to see those hammer marks on it as well.
So, I mean, it's encouraging that there remains a market. In fact, the market is getting larger as
Yeah.
we go along.
Absolutely. We're at the Cole Harbour Heritage Farm Museum in the blacksmith shop here. You'll notice I have the fire on right now. We've been doing some things here, making some fire pokers earlier on in the day. And we will finish these off and paint them, and we'll put them in our gift shop for sale for those who are interested in them. So basically in the blacksmith shop we have a couple components here that we need. We obviously need a forge where we will heat our metal. So we have an area here where the forge will hold the coal and heat. We have an air source from the blower that goes down and enters through the bottom of the pot, and we'll introduce air into the pot to make our fire grow and heat our metal up. And we also need an anvil where we'll do our metal pounding. So we heat our metal up, and we'll pound the metal into shape over a course of heatings, depending on what it is we're working on. And another important part of a blacksmith shop is a leg vise. You'll see here it gets its name as kind of an obvious name for the vise, where it has a leg that extends down to the ground, so it'll take a lot of the concussion or a lot of the hammering that you do here with the metal. So we have the blacksmith shop here with a various selection of tongs and different tools that really make up the blacksmith shop. From there, whatever it is you're looking to do, you can add to as you see fit. And if you're looking to do something specific, you may need a tool or a piece of equipment for that. But these are the basic items that you need to operate a blacksmith shop.
Well, thank you very much, Frank, for joining us, and thank you, Kevin, for showing us around your shop here.
Thanks for
It's
coming.
been a real treat
Thank you.
to come here and visit you. And if you want to find a copy of this book, you can get it off our website, sspub.ca. You can get it off amazon.ca, and it's also for sale in good bookstores near you, as well as it's for sale here in Cole Harbour Heritage Farm as well. So, thank you for joining us.